This Sunday on Capitol Connection, a new president takes over the Illinois Senate. Democrat Don Harmon takes the reins and ditches his side job.
Let us also use this occasion to think about who we are, what the people need us to be, and how we can reset the tone of the culture here in Springfield.
Why a perceived conflict of interest prompted the new Senate president to step aside, and
any voter fraud is unacceptable.
Was there voter fraud in Illinois? How hundreds of non-citizens were registered to vote, and some of them did in 2018. Plus, the state of the state in Illinois. Governor Pritzker completes year one in office and has his eyes on 2020. We hear from the governor with a preview of his agenda in this new year. And joining us on our Reporters Roundtable, Peter Hancock from Capital News, Illinois, and Bernie Schoenberg from the State Journal-Register. It's all coming up on Capitol Connection.
From the Illinois State Capitol Rotunda, Capitol Bureau Chief Mark Maxwell is asking the tough questions. This is Capitol Connection.
Welcome to Capitol Connection. I'm Mark Maxwell, reporting from the Illinois State House on Sunday, January 26. The Illinois Senate has a new president. Democrat from Oak Park, Don Harmon, takes the reins of the Illinois Senate after a victory over Majority Leader Kim Lightford last week. It was a long, drawn-out personal battle behind the scenes, one that saw Harmon pull away at the end and win the support of his members of his own caucus. The Senate Democrats rallying behind Harmon's cause down the stretch. We go back to last Sunday for a look at the top news of this week.
It's a new day. We've got a new Senate president. Don Harmon will be the 39th. He's the 39th Illinois Senate president. So we've got a new leader and we're ready to move forward.
Senator L.G. Sims was a candidate for Senate president just 1 week ago until he threw his weight behind Majority Leader Kim Lightford. Do you have Senator Sims' support?
I do.
That nod from Sims appeared to signal momentum was on Lightford's side until Saturday night when another member of the Black Caucus and the son of former Senate President Emil Jones backed her rival, Senator Don Harmon. In the final moments of the internal struggle, Jones emerged once more Sunday to predict Harmon's victory and acknowledge tensions had taken their toll.
I don't want to say hard feelings, but strong emotions. The stakes are high.
Moments later, Senate President John Cullerton took the gavel one final time.
It's with mixed emotions that I'm giving it up.
Governor Pritzker stepped in to officiate.
Due to President John Cullerton's resignation as Senate President, there's a vacancy in the office of President of the Senate.
I'd like to place in nomination Senator Don Harmon.
Lightford eventually conceded and threw her support behind Harmon. And the new Senate president set his agenda for 2020.
Let us also use this occasion to think about who we are, what the people need us to be, and how we can reset the tone of the culture here in Springfield. 60 years ago, John F. Kennedy said, "No responsibility of government is more fundamental than the responsibility of maintaining the highest standard of ethical behavior for those who conduct the public business."
Moments after he was sworn in, Senate President Don Harmon held a brief press conference to lay out his agenda.
As I traveled around the state, visiting with my colleagues and campaigning, the two things I heard most often from my colleagues was an urgent need for us to work together to help restore the public's trust in Illinois government, while at the same time, a similarly urgent need for us to rationalize our tax policy by adopting the Illinois fair income tax on the ballot in November and finding a way to push down the pressure on property taxes.
But the big question, how would he negotiate with powerful House Speaker Michael Madigan?
Nothing advances in Springfield without passing through both chambers. I have great confidence in my ability to work with Speaker Madigan without being subservient to him. I will respect the institution of the Senate and do my best to defend it as an institution, but I'm confident that I could work with him.
And joining us now is our Reporters Roundtable, Bernie Schoenberg from the State Journal-Register and Peter Hancock from Capital News, Illinois. Good to have both of you with us today.
Thank you.
So we saw last week the election. The Illinois Senate has a new Senate president for the first time in 11 years, Senator Don Harmon. First, before we get into what he hopes to do, how did he do it? How did he win this election? The perception for weeks leading up to this was that Majority Leader Kim Lightford was perhaps a front runner. She had been a more public face. He was doing much of his campaigning really more behind the scenes, one-on-one with these other senators. How did he pull it off?
You know, Kimberly Lightford drew a lot of attention because she would have been the first African-American woman to hold that position. I think Don Harmon just worked behind the scenes a lot more. And I think we're going to find out how many IOUs he issued to round up those votes.
Moving on to how the agenda is, give us an idea of Don Harmon. Who is he, the Senate President? A longtime lawyer. There was some news just this week as well, I believe, from that interview you mentioned, Bernie, that he's stepping away from his law firm in Chicago, the Democrat from Oak Park. And I think he mentioned, he said this is to detangle from the appearance of or the actuality of a conflict of interest.
Well, and if you listen to the speech he gave on the floor of the Senate right after he was elected, ethics reform is going to be very high on his agenda. And he even quoted John F. Kennedy saying, you know, the highest ethical standards, you know, are what people demand of public officials. So there has been a problem here with people in the Senate who, in their private life, work for law firms that do business with local governments, that do business with the city of Chicago or whatever. It creates an appearance of a problem.
Senate President Cullerton had a law firm that worked with clients that lobbied governments. Speaker Madigan.
Well, in fact, Don Harmon's law firm also did a lot of work for local governments around the Chicago area. But at the same time, I think in fairness, the Senate President's job is pretty much a full-time job, and doing that and being the partner of a large law firm in Chicago would be pretty demanding.
Yeah, so you didn't see Senator Harmon come out and say Speaker Madigan should do this, but his actions demonstrate a different approach.
Well, he talked about ethics, but he did mention, I think more than once in that interview, that he's going to be spending a lot of time being Senate President, and he just can't do it all with the time that he's going to devote to the new job. So I think that was also key in his view, which I think gets him away from telling other people what to do.
Leading by example, even as the legislature has a lot of work to do in their commission to examine ethics and the role of state lawmakers in private life as well. Bernie and Peter, stick around. We've got more to come still after what happened this week. The State Board of Elections and Secretary of State's office admitting a blunder at the ballot box. We'll tell you more coming up.
You're watching Capitol Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
Per the Secretary of State's letter, this has been a problem since July 2nd of 2018. So that means there are potentially people who are registered to vote before the 2018 midterm elections that may have voted in the midterm election.
A spokesman for the State Board of Elections confirmed, quote, "We do know that some of the 574 non-citizens voted in 2018. A letter from the Secretary of State's office blamed a programming error in the signature pad at the counter at the DMV.
For whatever reason, that technological programming error did not properly remove the individuals who were applying for a driver's license were inadvertently pooled into the automatic voter registration.
I don't have a lot of confidence in the Secretary of State's office right now.
In a letter to House Speaker Michael Madigan, House Republicans called for oversight hearings. Secretary of State Jesse White's office said the problem is contained and under control.
We discovered an error, and we fixed it, and then we notified the State Board of Elections and the local election authorities and the individuals that were impacted.
We have to have complete confidence that our offices are doing the right thing, and that goes for the Secretary of State. He may or may not have known about this. I have no idea, but he needs to be held responsible for it. It's his operation that allowed this to happen.
Is anybody being held accountable for this error?
Well, we take it very seriously. And like I said, we fixed it as quickly as soon as it was discovered.
It appears that these are 600 people. They're legal residents of the United States, but not legal to vote.
Governor Pritzker and the State Board of Elections reacted Tuesday to a scandal at the Secretary of State's office. A programming error in electronic keypads at DMV locations across the state automatically registered hundreds of non-American citizens to vote.
The Secretary of State's office forwarded 574 names into the AVR process, but only 545 of those were actually registered by the local election authorities.
15 of those people actually did vote, although 3 of them were already American citizens, including one in Macon County where a race was decided by just 1 vote.
Based on, like I say, prior contacts with the office, we believe they're a citizen and they're entitled to vote. They've been voting for a very long time, and they have made multiple address changes, and each time they've come into the office to do that in the past, they attested that they were a citizen.
I want the Secretary of State to get us the information as to why these individuals, why these 500 plus individuals were listed as non-citizens, but given the chance to vote.
These are people that were in Illinois legally. They were doing the right thing by identifying themselves as non-citizens, and it was the state that did not protect them. In fact, it was completely the Secretary of State's office fault for putting them at risk.
Any voter fraud is unacceptable. And we have to make sure that a full investigation is done here so that we know what went wrong, the glitches that took place here that caused this, and that it doesn't happen again. Remember, this is a bipartisan automatic voter registration law that was put in place. So there's a universal belief among Republicans and Democrats that automatic voter registration is a good thing, and it works in other states. And so we need to make sure we get it right here.
What happens if ICE reaches out to the State Board of Elections and said, give us the names?
If ICE subpoenas us, we would have to obey a subpoena.
We're back again with our Reporters Roundtable. Bernie and Peter joining us again. We expect to see hearings in the House committee. We saw Representative Chris Welch, who chairs one of these committees, announced that he plans to investigate this further. He has Governor Pritzker's support in investigating fully exactly what happened here. Any preview of these hearings, what we expect to hear from the Secretary of State's office? We've heard their early explanation about a programming error in these electronic keypads at the DMV facilities. But what kind of questions, what kind of investigation are we in for here in these political hearings?
Well, I think one of the first questions would be, why didn't this show up when you tested it? You don't just write computer code and launch the thing, without testing it first. And there was a very long rollout. I mean, that bill passed in 2017. They didn't launch the program until July of 2018. So I think there's going to be some question about what kind of testing did they do to make sure that non-citizens were not being forwarded to the Elections Board.
And perhaps an oversight, because I think, as Representative Butler pointed out in their press conference on Wednesday, Secretary of State Jesse White said in an interview, even just in the last year or so, that things are going really well with the automatic voter registration.
Well, and clearly they didn't apparently catch this until about a month ago, and then, sent a letter to the State Board of Elections. 574 people were notified. If you got a voter registration card and you're not a citizen, destroy it or bring it back to your local election authority. So,
and don't vote.
and don't vote, because that's problematic on its own. The Secretary of State's office, people said initially, isolated incident, it's fixed, we're fine, we're moving forward. Clearly, the legislators on both sides of the aisle, particularly the Republicans, because Jesse White's a Democrat, but everybody wants to know, how did this happen?
That was more just a human error, which you'll see from time
and so
to
we don't
time.
know how much human error there is, because, if only 15 people in the entire state of Illinois who are suspected of possibly being non-citizens ended up voting, and we know already, just through checking, that because they've been contacted, 3 of them were actually citizens. You just don't know how big the problem is. Clearly, it's something that needs to be fixed, so there are not these questions, and there'll be a lot of questions about how it all happened and how it can never happen again.
So say there's a dozen of these folks then who, if we presume from this point, because they self-declared at the keypad that they're not a citizen, that they are in fact not a citizen, a legal resident, but they got a government stamped postcard in the mail, essentially saying, here's a voter ID card, here's where you go to vote.
As Secretary of State, and it's his office that admitted the mistake. The Republicans, while even saying in some cases, we know there was no fraud here and the people who are non-citizens didn't do anything wrong, the Secretary of State's office did, it still makes the Secretary of State's office look bad, so Republicans will probably get more political benefit out of this, or try, as you said about fundraising. And the Democrats have to show they care, but it is their guy, so we'll see where it goes.
Also, Congressman Rodney Davis, who chairs, or he's the ranking Republican in Congress in the committee that oversees federal elections, he has sort of seen this as something to address locally here as well. And he joined us sort of press conference on Wednesday with state Republicans. Is there a federal solution to this? What does he see here?
Well, he said other states are thinking about automatic voter registration systems like Illinois has, and if they are going to expand, they should make sure they do it right and see in Illinois that even if you have a good idea, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work. Make sure you know how to implement it before you do. Plus, he noted that the federal government provides money to states to distribute to local election authorities to upgrade their security and their voting systems. And he said maybe of the, I think he said $15 million that Illinois is getting, some of it could be used on this if necessary. I think Democrats wanted more than Republicans have given out of Congress, but there is a big block. He mentioned more than $400 million going to the states for election security. So he can certainly say that I'm a constituent of and I vote in Illinois, but also the federal government provides some backup.
And oh yeah, there's a big election this year. Maybe you've heard. Early voting starts in less than 2 weeks. The Iowa caucuses also less than 2 weeks. Also, what does Illinois plan to do in 2020? We hear from Governor Pritzker next.
You're watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
I've had to ration my insulin due to the fact that I could not afford my 30-day supply that cost $1,800.
Thousands of diabetic patients in Illinois will soon pay a lot less out of pocket to get their insulin. That's thanks to a new bill Governor Pritzker signed into law on Friday that caps the out-of-pocket expense for insulin at $100 for some insurance plans, namely state employee health insurance plans or other plans. If you have your insurance through your employer, you may have to wait for Congress to take action on that. But that did not stop Governor Pritzker and Senate Democrat Andy Manar from celebrating this legislative accomplishment earlier this week.
As this bill, now the law, is the biggest step that we can take under Illinois law. So self-insured programs are insurance programs offered by employers that are not covered. Those are federally regulated.
And what else is on Governor Pritzker's list of New Year's resolutions? We sat down with him just after the start of the new year to get a better sense and a glimpse at his wish list, his agenda in 2020. He said Governor Edgar, former Republican governor, gave him this advice.
And he said the number one most important thing you can do is introduce and pass a balanced budget. And it may sound boring to some people, budgets. Who cares about a budget? Except you've seen what happened when people didn't care about passing a budget in the state. 2 years with no budget meant, massive overspending in our state. So I made sure we got a balanced budget, a bipartisan balanced budget passed. So that's going to be priority one. I know you'd like to hear something more dramatic. Budget doesn't sound exciting, but it is important to us, especially in our state where we haven't done it well for so many years. That's number one. Number two, I've pronounced, but not many people have paid attention to the fact that I want to make Illinois the best state for raising young children. Our families ought to be attracted to the state of Illinois because they know that their children are going to be well cared for, that they're going to get a great education, starting from birth, frankly, that the services are there for them, that we've got a great preschool system, K-12 system, and that they can afford to send their kids to college.
And we're back one more time with our Reporters Roundtable. Peter and Bernie joining us here. Governor Pritzker laying out his eyes on 2020. We have a State of the State address this Wednesday. What do you expect to see in addition to what Governor Pritzker told us there? What does he hope to tackle or take on in 2020?
Right, but that would generate in the following year another $3.5 billion for the state. Maybe the state could fund education better. Maybe that takes the pressure off local property taxes for education, because education, K through 12 schools are the biggest part of what people pay in their local property taxes, and they're quite high in Illinois.
So in short, the governor is banking on this progressive income tax. He's banking on voters to agree with him that you have to tax the rich a higher income tax in Illinois. One obstacle to that, as some of the business leaders have pointed out, in Colorado, where they recently tried this 3 times, voters have rejected this idea. In Colorado, a purplish blue state, 3 times. Does Illinois have a better shot at getting that done? The stakes seem to be higher with the budget problems here.
Yeah, I think Illinois does have an easier time with it, especially if you sell it on the idea that at least some of the increased revenue is going to be used to buy down property taxes by putting more state general fund money into schools, because that's where the bulk of your property tax bill is going, is to fund your local schools.
That relies on trust, though, between voters and the government, that when those taxes go up, that there will be that property tax reduction somehow down the road. That becomes a bit of a complicated math equation.
Even that building program I just talked about, they doubled the gasoline tax in the last year to get that done. People are upset and there are more fees on purchases of cars and things like that. and license plate renewals. So the idea that Illinois is a high-tax state will be used against this idea. What it will be used for, though, is a lot of advertising. Governor Pritzker, as we know, is one of the 50th, or one of the top people on the Forbes list. He's a 3-time billionaire. He's already donated $5 million to the Outside Group, Think Big Illinois is what it was called during the campaign, to advertise for this progressive income tax. There will be plenty of advertising on the other side too, but the pro people will have plenty of funding, and we're a Democratic state. It might make it easier to pass.
All right, I'm going to put you both on the spot here for just a minute. We have a State of the State address coming up. If you had to predict today, Governor Pritzker summarizing the state of Illinois, the state of the state in one word, what do you think Governor Pritzker might say? Give us a preview of the State of the State address in one word or in so many words.
I think he's going to say that the state is finally moving forward, that we now have a balanced budget. We're on the road to financial stability. I don't think he's going to claim that we're actually there yet, but he wants to see progress toward financial stability for state government.
I was going to say progressing. I think one key difference between he and the person he defeated to get here, one-term Governor Bruce Rauner, is he talks very positively about the state. Rauner said some nice things, but was always trashing our business climate and lots of other things about the state. Pritzker will say we're on a good road and we should continue in that direction.
We'll set the over-under on number of standing ovations on the Democratic side of the aisle, at least at, what do you say, 20 times in a 30-minute speech? A lot of self-congratulation to be expected on the horizon.
Illinois is the best state in the country to fill in the blank, raise a family, start a business, whatever. He wants to make Illinois sound very welcoming, very positive.
Well, Governor Pritzker's first year will have its day in the sun on Wednesday. Bernie and Peter, thank you for joining us. We're back in just a moment. And that does it for us today. Remember, you can watch our extended roundtables up on our website. We do hope you'll join us again at the same time next week. For Capital Connection, I'm Mark Maxwell.